Hi, I'm Juliet, and these are my top 5 books from the 40 I read in 2025. This is a pretty varied selection. There's mystery and thriller, historical fiction, gothic literature, women's fiction, and each author comes from a different country. For every book, I'll also specify who I think would enjoy it most, so you can decide whether it's something you actually want to read. You should stay until the end because my number 1 book and number 2 have become some of my favorite novels of all time. If you take just one recommendation from this list, it should be one of those. So without further ado, let's start. Number 5 is The Hypnotist's Love Story by Liane Moriarty. Don't be turned off by the cheesy title. I know it sounds cliched, but this is quite an interesting story about love, obsession, and heartbreak. And if you think you don't know who Liane Moriarty is, you definitely do. She's an Australian writer, the author of Big Little Lies, which inspired the world-famous show. Her books are rather different from the ones I usually read. I am more of a literary fiction girl. However, every now and then, we all need to read a simple, comforting story. Her novels usually follow women in their 30s or 40s who are experiencing marriage, careers, motherhood, friendships, pretty typical women's fiction. However, Liane Moriarty always incorporates some kind of mysterious situations in arguments that are otherwise very mundane, which adds an intriguing quality that turns her novels into true page turners. This novel follows Ellen, a hypnotist who meets Patrick, a widower. She starts falling in love with him, but she finds out that he has a stalker, what people would usually call a crazy ex-girlfriend. The story switches perspectives between Ellen and Saskia, the stalker. So simultaneously, we see Ellen and Patrick starting their lovely relationship while we learn how Saskia became so obsessed with him. So you start wondering if Patrick is who he seems to be and if he did something to drive Saskia crazy. I really liked how instead of antagonizing to women over men, the novel explores the experiences of each of them and the complexities of relationships when life gets rough. Still, the tone is light and fun, so I would recommend this to you if you're looking for an easy and cozy read that will keep you intrigued. Number 4 is Rosaura at 10 o'clock by Marco de Nevi. This is a mystery novel by an Argentinian author, but it stands out from most mysteries because of its structure. The novel is divided into 5 parts, told from multiple perspectives. Each one reveals a new layer of the crime, but the novelty is that every episode is narrated in the style of a different literary genre. The first chapter is like a pulp romance, so the affordable books that were very popular in the first half of the 20th century, which usually consisted of cliched love stories and focused on social customs. This presents a love story in a humorous tone, which is completely shattered by the end of the first chapter when we find out that Rosaura was murdered and the main suspect is her husband. The next 4 episodes are incredible, even delirious at times. There's a tragic comic monologue, police interrogations, and the book finishes with a great letter, which really captures the innocence of a young girl who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think you'll love this if you like mystery novels, but you're tired of the same old plots which follow a rigid formula. However, it might be a bit complicated to come across an English translation. Number 3 is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson is considered one of the great American writers of horror, which set the expectations for a spooky story, being my first time reading one of her novels. However, this is more of a mystery and drama and a contemporary interpretation of the Gothic aesthetic. Like many other Gothic novels, this book explores the moral aspects of a crime. This story actually begins 6 years after the murder of the Black Blackwood family, following the lives of the three survivors: Mary Catherine, the narrator, her beloved sister Constance, and their uncle Julian. They live in an isolated mansion on the outskirts of a town where everyone hates them. And as the story advances, we learn more about the crime that started the downfall of the Blackwood family. There are class tensions, but we mainly see the perspective of the rich and powerful family, except now they've lost most of their power. The book also explores how conservative societies function in small towns. Acts of violence are public and mass revenge is encouraged in a completely traumatic scene. Meanwhile, acts of kindness are private. People try to redeem themselves in secret while feeling ashamed. I think this book is for you if you enjoy complex stories about the dynamics of families and communities. However, this is a sad and disturbing story, which is sure to cause a moral dilemma for its readers. So you're warned. Number 2 is Rebecca by the English author Daphne du Maurier. While reading the last 200 pages of this novel, I felt so immersed I didn't want to stop to do anything else, which is a sensation I always look for in literature. Let me start by saying that this novel has been widely misinterpreted, because for decades it has been presented as a love story, which it isn't. This is a gothic novel about jealousy, class, violence, identity, and more. Maybe you could call it a dark romance, but not a regular romance. So what is the argument about? Well, the protagonist is an average girl who works as a companion for a rich lady. And this is how she meets a wealthy widower, Maxim de Winter. Shortly after they meet, he proposes, presenting the possibility of a completely luxurious life that would have been unattainable for the protagonist otherwise. She accepts and they move to Maxim's mansion, Manderley. There, the protagonist realizes that she can't fulfill the role of mistress of the house because she's not an upper-class lady. And to make it worse, she has to deal with the haunting memory of Rebecca, the late wife of Mr. de Winter. The protagonist feels like she'll never be as smart, sociable, and beautiful as Rebecca was. But as the story advances, she will discover that Rebecca actually wasn't who she seemed, and neither was Maxim. The protagonist is sort of an unreliable narrator, very unlikable in my opinion, which makes the novel even more fun to read. She and Rebecca perfectly represent the adversities women had to experience because of unattainable standards. The story also exposes the extreme measures a woman could take to preserve a relationship, especially in a time when marrying up was one of the few ways for women to benefit from social mobility. This novel is for you if you enjoy intriguing stories about class, gender roles, and the darker aspects of falling in love or obsessing over someone you barely know. I have so many more thoughts about this book, which I shared in a previous video. So if you're interested, you can watch it later. I'll link it in the description. And my number 1 novel of this year was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, who is from Northern Ireland. This book is devastating, but in a beautiful way. You've probably heard about the film that was released recently, directed by Chloe Zhao and starring Paul Mescal and Jessie Buckley. But even if you've watched it, I would still recommend reading the novel because the writing style is incredible, so it doesn't matter if you already know the argument. You'll still enjoy reading this. Hamnet is a beautiful story based on the few facts we know about Shakespeare's biography, but it focuses on his family life, particularly on his love story with Anne or Agnes Hathaway, and on the tragic death of their 11-year-old son, Hamnet. The real protagonist is Agnes, who is vindicated by Maggie O'Farrell since she has been frequently represented as an ignorant peasant whom Shakespeare despised. In this story, she has a deep knowledge of the natural world and the ability to cure people. Of course, the representation of Hamlet's sickness and death and the consequences of it is tragic. But the story also focuses on the power of art in dealing with grief. You'll enjoy this book if you like historical fiction, especially books that focus on the mundane but transcendental aspects of the lives of great figures. I also have a full video on the mysteries of Shakespeare's life and how Hamlet reinvents his biography by shifting the focus to his family. So check it out if you're interested. It's also linked in the description. And that's everything for this year. If you've read any of these books, please let me know your thoughts and also share your favorite book of 2025 in the comment section. It might end up being one of my favorite books of 2026. Thank you for watching and see you soon.